So it's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I will try not to take too long because I know we're already a little bit behind schedule and it's late in the evening. I will warn you if, I'm sorry, Greg, that I did this, but I changed up my presentation quite a bit because it just didn't flow. Glad Angie's laughing. I think this will flow a little bit better. So the Water Resources Division overview. Okay, Water Resources Division. We are responsible for the raw water supply of the city, if you will. We develop, we administer, we protect the water resources of the city for today and tomorrow. And we are responsible for acquiring that raw water supply and bringing it to the city. My division consists of 3 groups, two of which are geographically based, and you'll see a why about that in the future of this presentation. But we have the Rocky Ford group, or the Colorado-Arkansas Basin group, run by Rick Keenitz. Can you see my pointer when I go like this? No? Oh, too bad. Oh, can I go like this? Greg is probably not happy with me experimenting as we go. Can you see that? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So the Rocky Ford group, run by Rick Keenitz. He's not new to us. We've had the fortune of having him for some time, but he is new to supervising that group, and they are responsible for all of the water rights, accounting and operations, and projects in the Colorado River Basin and the Arkansas River Basin. The South Platte Basin group is run by Don Jewell, and similarly, they are responsible for the South Platte Basin acquisitions, operations, accounting. And the reason there's a geographic separation there, or geographic use, is because the rules, the politics, the people, the systems, the water is so different in each basin. And so it makes a lot of sense to have people who are very specialized in each of the basins and have relationships with the other water users, with the systems, with the water commissioners. It also makes sense to have this middle group, which is run by Rich Vidmar. This is our integrated ecosystems, or integrated basin and ecosystems group. And they provide support, engineering support, to both of the geographic groups, as well as run more specialized projects and activities such as Watershed Health out of this middle group. Kathy Kitzman is our water resources principal. She doesn't have a team, but she does enough to be a team in and of herself. And she runs our legislative work that we do. We're quite involved in water rights legislation and water resources legislation. And she also helps the rest of the department with their legislation. So that's the team in short. We have a number of goals, as you would expect, involving the availability, the operations, and diverting the raw water supplies, acquiring the raw water supplies, developing storage. Partnerships are a really important piece to water resources. The basins can be very political. There is a lot of competition around water resources. There's also a lot of sharing, and there's a lot of working together. There's a lot of collaboration. And a lot of what water resources does would be so much more difficult if we did not do that in partnership with other people. I know Marshall talked about partnerships with like Denver Water and Colorado Springs. We have some partnerships that go back to the beginning of sort of Aurora Water, if you will, and other ones that we are just working on today. But we are always looking to seek and maintain partnerships to develop and protect our supplies. Administration and operation, we'll talk a little bit more about that. That's a hugely important piece of what we do. Of course, we assist in looking at the future and trying to figure out how we're going to meet those future demands. And then another rather unique area is to participate in a number of processes around different water supplies and processes that can impact yield. So for example, One of the processes we've been engaged in for many years now, I would say 7 or 8 years, is called SPROG, the South Platte Regional Operations Working Group, Opportunities Working Group. And it's a process that's designed to figure out how the South Platte might develop that last increment of water that's available. And so it's a big deal. It's very complicated. Whether it comes to fruition is still a question. Other groups that we're involved in are Watershed Health groups that are looking to work on forests and wildfire activities. There's just numerous different processes around people trying to answer complex water resource questions that we like to be engaged in. Specifically, the Water Resources Division some time ago did a little project or exercise in defining our core functions and what those look like. And the rest of my presentation will focus on these core functions. The water rights, which include decrees and IGA compliance, IGA being intergovernmental agreements, new supply acquisitions, raw water operations, storage development, accounting, and watershed health. So let's start with water rights, because that is such an interesting place to be. Colorado. And usually I would ask here what people know about Colorado water law. I know Angie is pretty well versed in it. Dick or Mike, are you guys, do you know a lot about Colorado water law? Are you terribly new to it, or you know some? What's your comfort level?
I wouldn't say that I know a lot about it, but I'm a former town manager, so I dealt with water system a little bit, so I'm a little familiar.
Great. And it's so much harder to ask questions when you're on the on Zoom or WebEx. So I hope this won't be too repetitive, or too elementary, but I think it's important, so I'll go over it anyway. Colorado's water right allocation system is the prior appropriation doctrine, which essentially says the first in time, first in right. So when people started settling the West, when the white people came west, started taking over the lands, they realized that water was not the same as in the East. And it's variable, and it flows hard and fast in the spring and very little and less in the late summer and fall. And that changes. So they also realized that water was not going to be available to everyone who needed it. So the state had to come up with an allocation system that would allow a fair way to determine who got water when. The prior appropriation doctrine says whoever appropriates a water right gets a date that's associated with that right. And the more senior the date, the more likely your water right gets water before the more junior dates. So water right is defined by 4 elements. It's defined by the place of use, the amount of use, the type of use, and the point of diversion. And every water right decree will have those 4 elements in it, as well as now they have numerous other elements, but those are the 4 basic elements of a water right: place of use, type of use, amount, and point of diversion. Water right is a property right, so it can be sold and transferred, separated from the land. And that's very important to us because most of the senior water rights in the state of Colorado, particularly in the South Platte, are agricultural rights that are decreed for farms and not to the city of Aurora. And so what we do is we acquire those rights and then we change them in water court. And when we change a water right, we are changing the type of use from ag to municipal, the place of use from the farm that it was used on to this city and to our city boundaries. We often don't change the point of diversion, but we'll add a point of diversion. And then we'll have to look at the amount of use, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the water right decrees are very important, and water court is a big deal in Colorado. It's Colorado is the only prior appropriation doctrine state that relies primarily on water court to determine its water rights, which makes it expensive because you're always starting in court. The structure in Colorado is there's 7 water basins. There's 7 administrative divisions. That's the state engineer's office and the division engineer's office. So the state engineer is responsible for the administration of all water in the state of Colorado, and he delegates that responsibility to division engineers in each of the 7 river basins. And then there are 7 water courts, 1 in each basin as well. Couple terms that you all may be with, but are very important to us. Of course, there's the term of water right, which I just defined, and measurements. I think the rest of the department talks in MGD, and we don't talk in MGD. We talk in acre feet and CFS, or cubic feet per second. So our volumetric amounts are acre feet, and our flow rates are CFS. So consumptive use is what becomes really important in a change case. And what the water court will do when we change a water right from agriculture to municipal use, you're only allowed to change that water that was actually consumed by the first use, in this case, agriculture. So you have to determine what portion, if let's say you had a 5 CFS water right and you irrigated 100 acres. I don't know if those numbers work, I'm just making them up. So of that 5 CFS that you diverted from the stream and applied to the farm, some portion of that would be consumed by the crop, and the other portion would be return flows. And those return flows would go back to the river, either overland into a waste ditch or by percolating underground and then eventually accreting to the stream. When we do a change case, we have to define the consumptive use, and we have all sorts of terms and conditions that are required to maintain return flows in place and amount and time of a change case. So changing water rights becomes fairly complicated and requires a lot of accounting, which we will talk about later. Just a quick picture of the basins. There are 7 Colorado water basins, although 4 of them all eventually run into the Colorado River. Those connections, like the Yampa White hits the Colorado outside the state, Gunnison hits the Colorado just above the state line, and the San Juan and Dolores, of course, hit the Colorado outside the state as well. We operate in the South Platte, the Arkansas, and the Colorado River Basin is where our water rights come from. So it's a fairly complex system. Our acquisition program is hugely important. That's how we are going to acquire the water that we need for the future. There's very little water left to be appropriated. So initially, and you still can today, anyone can go appropriate a water right. To appropriate a water right, all you need to do is divert water from the river and apply it to a beneficial use. However, if you diverted, say today on March 9th, 2021, that would be the date of your water right. And in most of our basins, most of the time, that water right is so junior that it would not yield any water. So for example, on the South Platte, the calling water right in the summer is generally an 1895, 1896 water right. And any water rights junior to that date will not necessarily yield water. So we are looking at, as I said, agricultural acquisitions. And these are the ditches that we own water rights in and that we continue to pursue acquisitions in. So moving to operations, raw water operations. So as I said, our operations are a little different. Our operations are about the diversion, storage, and movement of water from the points of diversion that we have in the different basins to eventually to the city. We have 2 locations. Our team is in the AMC and in the Rocky Ford office. That's Rick Kienitz's team, the Rocky Ford team. The Colorado ARC team is in the Rocky Ford office. As I said, we work in 3 basins. We have 12 reservoirs that we work. We don't necessarily own all of these. Some of them, like Aurora, Quincy, is entirely Aurora's. Many of these are shared. Homestead, Twin Lakes, Pueblo, Henry and Meredith. We share a partner on. And we have over 156,000 acre feet of capacity in our current system. We are in multiple counties, which is another reason why relationships are so important. and the reason why our system can be so complex. And we have over 300 individual water rights spread out through these 3 basins. This is just a geographic representation of where we operate. So this is the Arkansas, this is the Rocky Ford office down here in the lower Arkansas. We have water collection systems in the Colorado River. We have Homestead, we have the Columbine Ditch. We have water rights that yield in the upper Arkansas of the river. We have water rights that yield in the lower Arkansas. We take them all through the Otero pump station. We also have water rights up in the upper South Platte that we catch in Spinney and move down to Strontia. And then we have water rights in the lower South Platte. And those are the ditches that I showed you earlier and where we've really been focusing our acquisition efforts. So you can see we are spread over a vast area. And the operations of these rights is daily operation. So every single one of those water rights might yield on a specific day, generally not so much in the winter, in the spring, summer, and fall months. And we need to be watching the river flows, determining when we can take water, how much can we take, where do we put it, how does it move. It's very complicated when you're thinking about over 300 different rights yielding on any given day. And that's one of the reasons why storage becomes so important. So these water rights, as I said, yield mostly in the spring, summer, and sometimes in the fall. But our demand, of course, is more regular. And so storage is necessary to help the yield meet the demand. Without storage, Greg would be turning people off all the time and telling them they could stop watering their lawn in October because there would be no water in October or September. So storage is a huge part of what we do and work with, and we have storage vessels in every basin. These also show some of the ditches as well, but Homestead Reservoir is, of course, a major project of Aurora Water Departments with Colorado Springs. Ivanhoe Reservoir is somewhat smaller, so these are Colorado River Basin rights. Arkansas Basin rights, we have Turquoise that we use, Twin Lakes that we have both water and storage in, Pueblo that we use to store our water rights from lower down on the system, from the Rocky Ford ditch, from Holbrook. We will move that up to Pueblo and then up into the Otero pump station. And then on South Platte, we have Spinney Reservoir, which is one of our big crown jewels, Jefferson Lake. They look almost like the same size, but Jefferson Lake is tiny. Strontia Springs, smaller. And then, of course, the reservoirs in the city themselves. It's not enough storage. And one of the projects, one of the things that you as the advisory committee members will often hear about are our future storage projects. And those are very important to us. They are long projects. They take a long time to develop and to come to fruition. So we have, oops, that was the slides are in a little odd order. I'm so sorry, but Prairie Waters project I meant to talk about earlier. This is our South Platte storage area. We have Prairie Waters. I think Marshall may have talked about it earlier. No? Okay, then I'll jump in. Prairie Waters is a hugely important project to Aurora. It's one that we're very, very proud of. In 2002, there was an incredible drought. And those of you who were here will remember how serious that drought was. And it took every water provider by surprise. No one was ready for that drought. And it was only a snowstorm in March of 2003 that pulled it out. Aurora at the time had about 7 months of storage, 25% of supply before that March snowstorm hit. And so it was a huge wake-up call. And what came out of that was the Prairie Waters Project, which is a group of reservoirs, of gravel pit reservoirs, wells, and pump stations that pick up water from the south, that picks up our reuse water. So our reuse water is water that has already gone through our system once, that's fully consumable. So we are allowed under Colorado water law to pick it up again and to bring it back upstream. And we bring that up through a 30-mile pipeline that runs from the North Campus up to the Binney Water Treatment Plant. And from there is cleaned and put back into our system. It's super impressive. It allows us a protection against drought because this is water that we've already used. So it allows us to be very efficient. It allows drought protection. It adds flexibility to our operations, and is just one of the crown jewels in Aurora's system. And part of our future water storage is we are constantly working on developing more gravel pit storage down by the North Campus. We actually spent all day today in a hearing with the Adams County commissioners helping to get a gravel pit operation permitted so that it will eventually turn into a gravel pit storage reservoir for us that will be connected to Prairie Waters. Our other projects include Wild Horse Reservoir, which is a very exciting project up in Park County. This is the to-be-built reservoir. This line is the Otero pump station line. So we bring our water over from the Arkansas and the Colorado through this pipeline. Usually we drop it into a channel where it flows, I'm not sure where the channel is here, where it flows into Spinney Reservoir naturally. And we are going to build a reservoir in the interim, and this will help us maximize our water supplies. We are not planning to get new water rights to put in this reservoir, but it will allow us to store water that we already have that we don't have a place to put now, and will enable us to be more efficient with the water resources that we have. We're also looking in the South Platte at Aquifer Storage and Recovery, being able to store underground, store close to the city. It's another way of working against drought. It conserves water by having less or no water evaporate. It can reduce the need to build large reservoirs and is a really important tool in our storage toolbox that we've been working on. Box Creek is that's been on the planning stages for many years. It was sort of put a little farther out due to Wild Horse and to ASR, but we do still have this idea of building a reservoir here. We own the land. We're constantly working on certain aspects of that project, but we don't expect to really focus on that project for another few years. And then Arkansas River Storage. So in the lower part of the Arkansas, we have water that we can't pick up right now because we can't store it. And it's called ROY, Recovery of Yield Storage. It came out of an agreement with the City of Pueblo and a number of other water users. The City of Pueblo was really concerned about the river as it ran through the city and what kind of amenity that provided or didn't. And they wanted it to be an amenity. They wanted a boat course through there. And so the water users agreed to allow more water to pass through the city than had traditionally happened, with the agreement that we could pick that water up again and bring it back upstream. But we need more storage downstream in order to make that happen. So we are working on that project. And all of this requires a lot of accounting. As I said, and as you guys are well aware, Colorado is an arid climate. It's an arid climate with highly variable water yields. So we have very different years. Right now, we're in something that's closer to 2002, but 2018 was closer to 1982. And so we have to be ready for whatever Mother Nature decides to throw at us. All of the water rights that we have, as I said, are accounted for daily. And that accounting is very complex and complicated. So when you pump a well, you not only have to track what you pumped that day, but you have to track when it hits the stream, and it will hit the stream for many, many days. So we're constantly tracking water. And this is just another example of the water rights yields, how they can be very low. In the Colorado, for example, the Arkansas, a 9 to 30,000 acre foot difference. The South Platte, a 10,000 to 70,000 acre foot difference. And then a total yield difference between 36 to 140,000 acre feet. So that variability requires a lot of close attention to what's going on, what's yielding, when it's yielding, and whether we can take it. finally, we are looking at a lot of watershed health these days. Watershed health is huge. As you know, we're experiencing warming, significant warming, and that trend is likely to continue. So each year is a little hotter, each month is a little drier, and that has a huge impact on water availability and water resources. It is impacting our watersheds very dramatically, and most of that impact comes from the overall drying effect on the watersheds. That leads to what we saw last year, for example, catastrophic wildfires throughout the state. And those wildfires have a direct impact on our system, our ability to take water. I believe, I wasn't here yet, so I might get these numbers wrong, but the Hayman fire, which burned above Strontia Springs Reservoir, cost over $40 million to dredge out the debris that washed down from that fire into the reservoir. And it still causes problems even today. So catastrophic wildfires are really can be devastating to water utilities. And therefore, we are very engaged in trying to help our forests stay healthy. Any questions?
I have a question. Are there any aquifer storage and recovery programs, I don't know, other systems that have them in place already?
Yeah, absolutely. Centennial, I think, was the first one in Colorado, and they've been running one for 15 years. And then everyone else, not everyone, but a number of other utilities are looking at them. Denver's getting ready to start a pilot project. I believe not Morrison, I'm blanking on a name. There's another small water district that has a little ASR project. So they're gaining in popularity, and a lot of people are looking at them, but they do already exist. Any other questions? Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Alex. And I put some notes in the chat through Alex's presentation. Mostly when she talks about what our how much we can divert in a year. Put that in perspective. We typically use 50 to 55,000 acre feet of demand in the city. So when we're talking about a dry year, we can only yield 33 or 36,000 acre feet. We're not even yielding our demands here. That's the importance of storage. So next up is
if I can, I do have a question. Alex, what is Aurora's senior most water right and junior most water right? Where do we fit in the spectrum?
Oh, that's a tough question. It's a great question, Dick. I'm not sure that I have the exact dates, and it would be fun to look into them. We certainly have a broad spectrum. So we certainly have water rights on the South Platte that are very senior, that would yield in a very dry year. That's what we usually try to go towards, are those very senior water rights. I'm not exactly sure of the dates. And then we have some wells that need to be augmented most of the time because they are, 1970, 80, 1990 water rights. So we have from the 1800s all the way to the 1990s. And actually, we're about to apply for a water right on one of the reservoirs at the North Campus. So that will be a 2021 water right. So we have everything.